Hey y'all, it's Chimdi. So I'm gonna talk about neglect in this video exclusively. Exclusively. I feel like I talk about it a lot in a lot of my videos because I've experienced it and I'm constantly processing the ways it's informed my life. And so I'm always like coming to some new insight and making a separate video about just that insight. And I've really been seeing the through line and how it all ties back to neglect. And the wonderful Dorn was messaging me on Instagram. I have a coaching Instagram, it's Coaching by Chimdi. They asked me like, hey girl, you wanna make a whole video about neglect? And this was a few weeks ago at this point, and the strong no that request elicited from my body was very notable. And I knew it was because that there was still just so much that I hadn't processed around it, and I really thought that truly just talking about it for 15 or 20 minutes, there's no way I'd be able to talk about it without breaking down. And I'm still pretty uncomfortable with weeping on camera. You know, I'll do it in the privacy of my own home, but to do it on camera and to make a video out of it, something about it for me feels like it's just private and intimate, and so I don't want to be sort of being that way on camera, right? And so I was like, if I'm still weeping about it, then I'm not ready to make a video. I just finished having a really beautiful meeting with the group of Black folks that were part of the spiritual program that I was doing for the last couple of years, the healing program. So we had our sort of wrap-up meeting after 2 years in that program, and it was powerful and beautiful. What really helped me was seeing that my experiences are not only my experiences. Like the reality of having an individual, an ancestral, and a collective experience, you know? So we as individuals, we are microcosms of the collective. And so the things that I've been processing and going through, I'm seeing mirrored in the faces around me. And similarly, I realized like as I am healing and releasing these things and as I'm sharing these things, it can provide a lot of value to the people who are watching. And someone left me a comment. I mentioned in another video that I was thinking about making this video, and someone was like, I think it would be like, if you did make that video, I would appreciate it because I think it would help me out a lot. And I was like, oh. That is the weight of responsibility, is that you like know you are being called to do something. People are like, hey, and you're just like, But I have to say, I'm so grateful for any time someone does say, hey girl, in terms of something I should create or something they have a question about, because what I often realize is that there's a part of me that is walking with a similar question or has a similar desire. I haven't been looking at that part of me, and so it's being externalized in the form of this person making this request or asking this question, and I really feel that. And so I think I'm gonna start there, but before we get into it, Patreon people, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate y'all. Subscribers, thanks for hanging out every single week. And if you want one-on-one support, I'm a creative coach and I help artists show up consistently and authentically. You can visit my website to put time on my calendar, or you can join me in January for a 30-day group challenge to help you launch and grow your YouTube channel. All right, let's get into this video. So when I was messaging Doran and they were like, hey girl, have you considered making a whole video about neglect? That actually kicked off a super powerful process, right? Because I have enough experience doing my inner process work to know that whenever there's a resistance to something, a no to something, my invitation is to just be with what's showing up. I don't have to push it or force it, just have to notice, oh wow, part of me has a very strong no to this. And so that night I was just kind of being with my process, being with myself, and the title of the video, of the potential video popped up, and it was, "You were neglected and I'm sorry." And just that phrasing sent me into like a process, and I was just like sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, because you know the thing with neglect is that it's the kind of trauma where something isn't happening to you, it's the absence, right? It's the absence of that support and that recognition and that holding and all these really important things that your body and your nervous system needs to feel healthy and safe and okay. Just to have this idea of someone seeing and recognizing that you've experienced this thing that you don't even realize the extent to which you experienced was itself super powerful. And a book that has been the most transformative for me in terms of neglect is called Running on Empty: Healing Your Childhood Emotional Neglect. It has been so powerful, and I think the reason it was so powerful for me is because I think of myself as being relatively well adjusted, you know, in terms of my life, in terms of my health, in terms of my career, in terms of my relationships. Like, I look around and I'm like, I think I'm doing all right, you know? And so I look back at my experiences and I'm like, okay, well then it must not have been so bad, because here I am doing great, right? Prospering, thriving. And so I read this book, and the book is full of examples of essentially what it would look like in a situation where the person was being met, you know, and not being neglected, right? And then they also give examples from patients who have experienced neglect, not really understanding that's what was going on, and they explain what could have happened in a situation that would have been, you know, more helpful and more supportive. They give an example of like a girl and how like something happens with like the parents, and I think there's like some kind of divorce or someone passes away. It's like some kind of extreme trauma happens. And then instead of talking to the kids and like sitting them down and explaining it, the parent who's still there or whatever basically just like doesn't talk about it and just goes on as normal. And I remember in the book was like, you know, ideally the parent would like sit the child down and be like, hey, here's this major thing that's happening in our life. Here's what's going on. And there's like this place that the child can like co-regulate and express their feelings and be met and be seen. When I read that, my jaw was on the floor. I was shocked. Because I'm like, that's what should have happened? Because I know I have experienced, my family has experienced a lot of really intense things, and at no point was there sort of like, hey, let's sit down and really presence these many elephants, this Sahara migration. Where does that happen? In the Serengeti, the migration of elephants and wild animals that are migrating through our living room. Hey, maybe let's talk about that. And that was not my experience. And in thinking about making this video, I think part of why I had a resistance to it is because I don't want to be throwing my parents under the bus, because I know that they have done and are doing their best, right? They are playing with the cards that they have been dealt. They are doing their best. Their own experiences have been so much more intense than I could have ever imagined, right? Like, my experiences of neglect are nothing compared to their actual experiences of trauma that they have had to hold in their body for actual decades. So I want to just be so respectful and so compassionate and loving, because I know they did the best they could, right? And so that was something that was another reason why I was like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit hesitant to make this video. And so reading this book, and I highly recommend it, was one of the sort of early resources that helped me understand, okay, not only have I experienced neglect, but the gap between what ideally would happen and then my actual experience is so much wider than I thought was possible. And that itself is very sort of earth-shattering. So my contextualization of like healing and trauma and all these things is sort of when we have something happen to us, when we experience neglect, a part of ourselves is overwhelmed by the situation. We can't process it at the time because it's too much for us as a kid. And so that part of us just like splits off, you know, just like goes over here somewhere and is minding its business until we get to the point where we can be like, hey, what happened when you were 4? You want to talk about that? And then that part is like, oh great, are you ready to hang out with me? And then it sort of comes back online, right? In the process I had around neglect, the sort of big one, okay, my camera got full. I connected to this version of myself who was sort of sitting alone, abandoned, right? And had sort of come to this sort of realization or decision, or had this sense of this is how it is, you know, not expecting it to change. Like, a part of me had just accepted the abandonment and the lack of emotional support and holding and regulation, and was just in that frozen state essentially. And what was so powerful for me is I imagined that this entire experience, my entire experience up until that moment, every single thing, every single person I'd met, every conversation, every program, every opportunity, all of the angels and saints, this entire world had been created so that that young part of me who had felt abandoned would understand that she was important. And all of this was created to go find her and help her and bring her back online. And I think with neglect, you really internalize a sense of worthlessness and of just not being important because you're not being given time and attention and energy. And so you just internalize it. Okay, like I must not deserve that. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, she's also a YouTuber on here. We were talking about creative stuff and I was expressing, this was not that long ago, this was maybe like a year or so ago, like 2 years ago, but you know, I remember expressing the sense of like, with my YouTube channel, like I was like, I mean, I know my videos are helpful or whatever, but you know, if it weren't me, someone else would do it. Like God would find someone else to share these messages with. Like I had a true sense of like, I don't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. Like God would replace me very easily. And she was so surprised. She was like, I'm really surprised to be hearing this from you. And in that moment, this was before I had done any of this process work, I really believed that. I was like, it's God. God will find, like it's fine, you know? And not understanding in a very fundamental way that every single person who is here is important and does matter and is important to the whole grand, beautiful structure of life itself. And that really hadn't connected. And I think it was because that part of me that would have understood that was hiding away in this corner, assuming that she wasn't being missed, you know, at all. And I actually had a really interesting experience where I left my super intense 2-year healing program with like 6 months left to go. And people would say to me, they're like, oh girl, we miss your presence, we feel your absence, all these things. And it wouldn't land. Like they would say it and I'd be like, oh, they're like being nice. They're like, oh, we miss homegirl. But it didn't really connect in me that they were there missing me because of the neglect, you know? And so the power of that process of understanding that I would be so important, that all of the angels and saints, even down to the people in my life who would like send me Instagram DMs to be like, hey girl, you know, like we are thinking about you and we care about you and all these things. And I feel myself getting emotional and I'm gonna truly try to resist it. It was super duper powerful. And part of why I wanna make this video is because I'm seeing the effects of neglect in so many different areas of my life. And to understand that it's that impactful is really like eye-opening for me. And I want to share it in case you are running into challenges and issues in your life, not understanding that like that might be the underlying cause, you know? And so an instance I thought of, I was hanging out with Thomas Hubel, my fave. He did an interview with Mind Body Green, and he was talking about how we will distance ourselves from others. And that's a process, that's a coping mechanism that we learned really early because it helped keep us safe. And so I have consumed a lot of Thomas Hubel's content over the last few years. And what I really appreciate is that it meets me where I am at. So as I heal more and clear more and let go of more stuff, the same idea, the same concept will land in like a way deeper way. And so I'd heard him talk about this many times before, but this time it really touched this part of me because I think he was talking about loneliness and about as an adult feeling lonely, but as a child, if you're experiencing all this neglect, it's really intelligent for you to withdraw your energy in because it keeps you safe, right? And I, in that moment, sort of transported back into like my childhood home and felt that movement. I felt the energy going in and me being like, oh, I'm not connecting to this. Like it is not safe for me to connect to all of this. And I thought about my life here in Maryland where I feel like I have friends like in the DC area. I have friends, you know, in different parts of the city, but I don't have that like close intimacy here in the city. And for a while I was thinking, oh, it's because I want to move again. And so I'm not really pouring into relationships here. If I know I'm going to move again, I'd rather sort of save that energy for when I'm in a place where I feel like I'll be really rooted and grounded. And then it dawned on me like, no, that's not what's happening. And I had a process last night where I really actually connected to this part of me that was truly so pulled back. And like adult Chimdi and one of the angels were like, let's go get her, you know, let's go find her. And so we go to her and she's literally like, back up. Like you literally just like take a few paces back. So we're literally like, you know, yards away. Might as well have been miles away. And then she was like, all right, that feels safe. And when I connected to that part of me, she was saying like, why are you here? I did not ask for you to come here. Literally leave me alone. Like, I am fine here. And there was such a sense of like, I have committed to this life of being alone in this space, and I'm actually not interested in having that line be breached. And part of the journey was also connecting to, you know, I've had that part of me this whole time, but of course as a human being, I love connection and I want connection. And that's meant I've put myself in situations that have been genuinely dangerous. And so this part of me was also saying like, Chimdi, I don't trust you. Like, I've seen what happens when you go out into the world looking for connection and it ends badly. And I don't want any more bad memories. And I had to really let myself presence and process this part of me that was like, you know, the options are to be out here dangerously looking for connection or alone and safe, and that's the one I pick. And so to really just hear that part of me, because that part of me has always been there, I just haven't been listening and I've been ignoring it. And each part of ourselves that splits off has a very deep wisdom for us that if we could integrate it would eliminate the problems and it would eliminate the challenges in our life. We only have the challenges because some of our wisdom and our knowledge isn't online. And so in that moment, I was able to bring her online and see, oh, okay, like it's actually genuinely not worth it for me. And so I don't need to ignore the part of me that's saying no because I'm not connected to her, you know? And this was just last night, so it's still very fresh and I'm really curious to see how it manifests in my life. But I can sense the difference in my body where a part of me is actually comfortable with saying no, you know? The other way I've seen neglect show up in my life is through people pleasing, which I have talked a lot about on this channel. And I had an instance recently that sort of showed me how, I don't even know if second nature is the word, but just deeply, deeply ingrained. And so I've been doing some coaching with this company and they are on Pacific time. And so as we've been scheduling the calls, they've been in Pacific time, so 3-hour difference, I'm on Eastern time zone. And so I've just been, in my head, like they'll say, like it'll be on like a spreadsheet and I'll see it and I'll just translate in my head, okay, 3 hours later, da da da. And so I'm talking to the person who's supporting me with the scheduling and she's like, oh, I realize you're in Eastern time. Do you want me to update the spreadsheet with Eastern time zones? And I was just like, no, it's fine. I've been just translating in my head. And I thought nothing of this, nothing. And she was like, no, I can just do it. And then she did. And it was in that moment where I realized like, it's so subtle and it's so natural and normal to be in this energy of, listen, I'm happy to be here. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I am blessed. Thank you. Do not feel the need to do anything more for me. I'm already just happy to be here. And how I sort of glorify that position and embody that position so thoroughly that very basic things that are not a big deal are not being addressed and not being asked for, you know? I think why that's scary is because I think of myself as being relatively self-aware and I know I'm actively doing all this healing work. And I also know that I can only support my coaching clients as deeply as I've met myself. And so it makes me, it was very scary because I'm like, oh, this is even deeper than I realized. And how can I make sure I am not passing this, you know I pass my light on to y'all who watch and to my clients, but I also pass on my shadows, right? Anything I haven't integrated is also showing up here in these videos and also showing up in the way I coach my clients. And I'm like, oh, I actively don't want to be passing on any shadows to anyone. And that's part of why I felt super motivated to continue doing the inner work around neglect. The final way I feel like neglect shows up that I want to talk about in this video so it doesn't get too long is, of course, in interpersonal and romantic relationships. And so I connected to this energy of like I would love to be in a healthy, committed, sexy relationship. And so I connected to the energy of actually being with this person, right? Like just imagining they were just right here in front of me. Because a big thing with manifestation is that if you're connected to the lack of something, like if you're like, I really want this because I don't have it, all you're doing is reinforcing not having it. So I know that the key is to, of course, connect to having it. So I was like, all right, let me connect to having this experience. And so I imagine this person in front of me and they're very close, you know, they got their hand on my face, very close. As I actually let myself be in the moment, because I noticed that there was some distance there, I realized that even though I was there, I wasn't fully there. And I was like, oh, why is that? I asked myself. And I realized it's because there was a part of me that didn't trust that the person wouldn't leave. And I think we know this is like a collective thing as well, you know, fear of abandonment, all of this stuff. But in that moment, I understood, okay, it's actually never safe to be fully present in a relationship if there's always the fear that the person's gonna leave. It helped me understand all of my past relationships where I feel like I was always one foot in. Like I was never both feet into any relationship because I just, not only did I look for people who were not, like I found people and I was with people who also weren't fully in, and I myself was not fully in because that's what I was comfortable with and that's what made sense to me. And so in doing this process, I was able to see, okay, the reason why is because I'm scared this person's gonna leave. And so what was really helpful for me was to actually connect to my inner resourcing, my like spirit team, the angels and saints, and really have this sense of like, I don't need to worry that I'm gonna be abandoned by my spiritual world. Like I don't need to worry about God abandoning me. I don't need to worry about the angels and saints not having my back. Like I can trust that no matter what, they'll be there for me. And I think that's maybe the final thing I'll share is sort of the neglect shows up in every area of your life, including your spiritual life. So even as I've been doing all of this spiritual work and getting closer and closer to God, there's always been this part of me that's like, I can't actually fully relax though and actually let God take the lead. I need to always make sure that if necessary, I can stand on my own and I can hold myself up and I can take care of myself. And that came, of course, from the experience of neglect. And so to understand like, okay, even in connecting to, like there's no group that is more supportive and more invested in my healing and growth than my spirit team. They literally are just there all of the time whenever I need them waiting for me. Like if there's one group that won't abandon me, it is God and my spirit team. And still, even with that group, I was like, I don't know. And I actually had an experience here on YouTube where my YouTube growth has been, to me, very random. Like I'll have videos go viral and then I'll have these huge spikes in views and subscribers, and then my sort of everyday videos will get, you know, a few hundred views. So it's very sort of unpredictable in this way. I had a huge drop recently in subscribers, and one thing I always think with like anything in life, but especially with like YouTube, is, oh, this is showing something to me, this is helping me do some kind of process, da da da. And so when I had this huge drop in subscribers, I was like, okay, this is for me to process. And what I processed was, could it be, because I'm gonna be at 7 years, you know, at the end of this year. I was like, oh, could it be that my season of YouTube is over, you know? And what I connected to was, YouTube is the one thing where I like can really control what I am doing. Like I can control how many videos I make, I can control how often I upload, I can control my topics and my thumbnails. Like there's such a sense of security that I have in terms of, I can do this. I know this I can do, and it's my two hands doing it, you know? There's an element of hoping it resonates with people and trust, but there's a much bigger sense that I can manually, through force versus power, on some David Hawkins, force this thing to happen. And so in considering the fact that actually even this too, you know, I should relinquish control of, helped me connect to this more existential sense of how scary it is to be in a state of trust and surrender, because in my experience of neglect, that led to, you know, a lot of suffering. So it can show up. I think that's why I wanted to share this video, was like, it's not just in relationships, it's not just in work, it's not just in spirituality, it's not just in family, it's in all of it. It's in every aspect of your life. And so similarly, when you do the healing work around it, it will similarly bless every aspect of your life. And lately I've been seeing area after area have all of this beautiful improvement, whether it's like being able to show up more consistently on YouTube and have it be easy and fun and not burn me out, and then having my coaching business grow and working with all these great new clients and getting paid so much more money than ever before, and like having a, you know, beautiful relationship with my sister and having that deepen and grow, and being able to be more vulnerable and having a deeper relationship with God in my spiritual life. All of these things are healing as I do this work around neglect, and of course the other things that I'm processing in my life. It's very rewarding and very worth it, but of course it is very intense. So I wanted to make this video if you are similarly on the path, because I have been so blessed by other people sharing their stories, and I want to be a part of the metaphor Thomas uses is like the water running down the mountain, you know, and how each person is learning from the person who came before them, then passing their wisdom on to the next person. In the same way water rolls down the mountain. So if you sort of let the water stop, you know, on your land, it can't flow down, and then all the land beneath will be parched, right? So it's our responsibility to pass on our healing and our integration and the collective. The final thing I'll share, I feel like I could go on for a while about this. Final thing I'll share, I'm reading this book that I love. It's called I Am Word. It talks about how when we do our healing work, our spirit team, our spirit guides benefit. It's not a one-way relationship where our spirit team is set and they're just helping us out. Everyone benefits when we heal, including our spirit team. So it's in everyone's best interest for us to heal. And I was like, oh. And that was really expansive for me, because I had this framework that was like, the spirit side is kind of done. And the only work is, I guess, happening here on earth, which makes no sense as I say it out loud. But to understand, like, no, it is a constantly generative process of expansion and healing and growth was really amazing. It helped me understand that what I am doing matters. And the final quote I'll share from that book is, it's not a direct quote, but something to the effect of, anytime you accept your limitations, you are willingly stopping your spiritual growth. And I was like, oh my gosh. Some of these limitations I like, and they're like, you can like them if you want, girl. You're just not gonna grow spiritually. And I'm like, oh, fine, I love growing spiritually. I guess I'll expand beyond my limitations. All right, that's the video. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments. Have you been neglected? Have you been neglected? Where were your parents at? Were they busy? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Shouldn't be laughing about this. I want this to be the compassionate part where I'm just like, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Love you.